Well, boys and girls, I'm glad that you came back to watch another video. But let's review for just a minute, okay? Remember on the last YouTube video, we talked about integers. And if you'll remember that integers are positive and negative whole numbers and zero. So we talked about integers, and now today we're going to move into lesson 2. And lesson 2 is titled Absolute Value. Well, that is not going to be something that you've heard of before, okay? That is new. That is a new topic in 6th grade. But it's called absolute value. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what absolute value means. Because when you say that, like I said, you really are not going to know what that means, okay? So let's put number 1 right here and let me give you the definition for that. Basically what absolute value is. It is the distance between a number and 0 on a number line. And number lines are very important when you are doing absolute value. Okay, so let me give you an example of what I'm talking about, okay? When I say the distance from a number and 0. All right, so let's say that we have our number line right here, okay? And of course, Miss Lane's going to put a 0 on the number line. All right, well, let's look at this for a minute. And let's say, for example, that I wanted to put a positive 4 on this number line. Okay, so I would do 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so if I wanted to put a positive 4 on the number line, how many steps would it take me to get to that positive 4 if I started at 0? All right, so let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you are 4 steps from 0. That is called the absolute value. Okay? How many steps am I from 0 if I'm sitting at a positive 4? You are 4 steps from 0. Okay. Now let's look at it on the negative side. So what if I was on a negative 4? Okay? If I was sitting on a negative 4, how many steps am I from 0? All right, let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4. You are 4 steps from 0. Now, let me make sure you understand something, boys and girls, because this is new. Okay, you don't say that you are negative 4 steps from 0. You are not negative 4 steps from 0. You are 4 steps from 0. So whether you go on the positive side or whether you go toward the negative side, you still say that you are 4 steps from 0. Okay? All right. So let's look at this, okay, for just a minute. Let's talk about what opposites are. What are opposites? Because that's another vocabulary word that you need to be familiar with for 6th grade. Okay? Number 2. Okay, opposites. Opposites. Okay. Numbers that are the same distance from 0 in opposite directions. Opposite directions. And again, guys, you have these notes. This is what's coming home in your packet, okay? So don't worry about necessarily, getting all the notes right now because I am sending you a copy home, okay? So when we talk about opposites, they're the numbers that are the same distance from 0 in opposite directions. And what I mean by that is what I drew on the number line over here. when you look over here, whether you go to the positive or to the negative side, it doesn't matter. You are still 4 steps from 0. Okay, let me give you another example. If we had a dot at 2, okay, how many steps are you from 0? You are 1, 2 steps from 0. Okay, well, let's say you were sitting at a negative 2. How many steps are you away from 0? You are still 2 steps from 0. You don't say, I'm negative 2 steps. You just simply say, I'm 2 steps from 0. Okay? So that's what I mean when I talk about opposites. Whether you're at 4 or negative 4, either way, you are 4 steps from 0. If you're at 2 or a negative 2, you are still 2 steps from 0. Okay? All right. So let me go over what an absolute value sign looks like so that I don't have to write absolute value every time when I do one of these problems. Okay, so this absolute value sign. Hold on just a minute. Let me get another marker. All right, so the absolute value sign. Okay, looks like this. Okay, y'all have not seen this before. This is going to be new. Okay, this is what it looks like. Looks like 2 L's. All right? That is an absolute value sign. So then Miss Lane doesn't have to sit here every time I go over this and write absolute value, absolute value. It's just easier to give the sign or the symbol for it. Okay? So let's look at this for a minute. Let me explain to you how this works. Okay, so let's say, for instance, they asked you, what is the absolute value of 6? Okay? If they ask you, what is the absolute value of 6? Okay, how many steps are you away from 0? Well, common sense tells me that I would be 6 steps from 0. So your answer would be 6 because you are 6 steps from 0. Okay, let's take a look at another one. What if you had a negative 18 and they asked you, what is the absolute value of negative 18? Okay, how many steps are you away from 0? 18 steps. Now you notice Miss Lane did not put that negative sign in front because again, I'm going to say this and you need to listen. You are not negative steps from 0. You simply say, I'm 18 steps from 0. You don't say, I'm negative 18 steps from 0. So you notice when I'm in the absolute value sign, all they're asking me is how many steps am I from 0? So you notice I dropped the negative because there is no such thing as negative steps. Okay? So you're 18 steps from 0. Okay? Let's do 2 more. All right? So let's say we had a negative 31. Okay? And again, there's your absolute value sign. All right, so boys and girls, how many steps am I away from 0? 31 steps. 31 steps from 0. No, you don't say I'm negative 31 steps. You say I'm 31 steps from 0. Okay, let's do one more. So let's say, 100. Well, what would the absolute value be of 100? Well, how many steps are you away from 0? 100 steps from 0. Okay? So as you notice, what happens is when you have the absolute value sign with that number. Okay, if you're a negative, you don't say I'm negative 18 steps. You say I'm 18 steps. Drop the negative sign. I'm negative 31 steps. No, you're not. You're 31 steps when it's in the absolute value sign. Okay? All right. So, again, one more time. Doesn't matter if I'm positive. It doesn't matter if I'm negative. When you do the absolute value of it, you notice that all my numbers are positive because you can't be negative when you're doing the absolute value because you can't be negative steps. Okay? All right, now let's take it up a little bit and make it a little bit harder, okay? Because that's pretty easy. All right? So let me get my eraser. Let me erase this. Let's make it just a little bit harder because you math people out there that are really smart in math, that's going to be real easy for you, okay, to figure out. So let's make it a little bit harder. Okay, so let me give you a couple of examples like this on how you would work an equation over this. Okay, so let's say you have the absolute value of a -4, okay, plus the absolute value of 5, positive 5, okay? So if you remember what I said, how many steps are you away from 0? 4. Not a -4. You are 4 steps from 0. Because remember, I told you you can't be negative. Can't do negative steps. Bring down your plus sign. What is the absolute value of 5? How many steps are you from 0? 5. So if you solve that equation, it's going to be 4 plus 5, which makes 9. So the answer to that equation is 9. Okay? All right, let's do another one. Okay? Absolute value of 7 minus the absolute value of a -3. Okay, so let's look at this one. How many steps are you from 0? 7. Bring down the minus sign, because that stays. That's a subtraction sign. That's not a negative sign, that's a subtraction sign. All right, what's the absolute value of a -3? How many steps are you from 0? 3. Remember, because you can't be negative steps. So it turns to 3. So then your equation is 7 take away 3 is 4. So your answer is 4. Okay, let's try one more. Absolute value of a -9 minus absolute value of a -4. Now remember, that's not a negative, folks. That's a minus sign, a subtraction sign. How many steps are you from 0? Well, you're 9 steps from 0. Bring down your minus sign. How many steps are you from 0? 4. Because remember, absolute value of a negative number has to be positive because you're not negative steps. So 4 steps from 0. So let's solve the equation. What's 9 minus 4? 5. Okay? So, again, on absolute value, when you talk, the whole lesson is about absolute value. You now know what the sign looks like. And now you know that all absolute value means is how many steps are you from 0? And it cannot be negative steps. So if you are on the negative side and you are at -4, make sure you understand that it's not -4 steps. You're still 4 steps from 0. Or if you're a -9, you are not -9 steps from 0. You're 9 steps from 0. Okay? So make sure that you look at my notes. All right? And if you need to watch the video again, you know you can. Now then, I do want to show you, I do have the notes for you, and I want to show you the guided practice real quick on what I did. Okay, so here's the copy of the guided practice. I told you to look at these examples. Those were just some examples that were already there. If you noticed, I marked out number 1. Now I want to show you something on this, okay? On number 2, it says identify the opposite of 6. Wow, that's a lot of words. So I'm going to show you how I work this. It says identify the opposite. So that's going to be first. Well, what's your number? 6. What's the opposite of 6? -6. Okay, now let's keep reading. What's the opposite of that? Well, if you have a -6, what's the opposite? +6. So your answer is 6. All right, look at this one. I see that absolute value sign. How many steps am I from 0? I'm 5 steps, boys and girls. You see that? You can't be -5 steps, So you got to change it to 5 steps. All right, here's one like I did on the board. Absolute value of 20, well, it's 20 steps from 0. I brought down the subtraction sign. What's the absolute value of a negative 3? Well, you can't be negative steps, so you're 3 steps from 0. What's 20 minus 3? 17. What is the absolute value of a negative 16? How many steps are you from 0? 16. Bring down my plus sign. What's the absolute value of negative 12? How many steps are you away from 0? 12 steps. What's 16 plus 12? 28. So there's your guided practice. Now I'm going to show you your independent practice. Okay, here's what it looks like. You're going to do numbers 1 through 9. I want you to identify the opposite of each one of those integers. Okay? Then on the second part, you're going to identify the opposite of each integer. So like with 12, first of all, ask yourself, what's the opposite of 12? And write it down. Then after you write that down, what's the opposite of that number? And write it down. And you will do that on all 3 of those. Then this is where they take it up a little bit, make it a little harder. I want you to give me the absolute value of a negative 14. And remember, all you're asking yourself is how many steps am I from 0? Okay, then you got the absolute value of 31 minus the absolute value of negative 1. And then the last one, the absolute value of negative 15 plus the absolute value of negative 6. So please complete that for Miss Lane, okay? And again, keep your notes. Again, you're going to use them next year. All right, so you have learned now about integers, positive and negative integers, and 0. And you've also learned about absolute value and what the absolute value sign represents. So stay tuned for lesson 3.